This week, we learned that the state budget shortfall is larger than previously reported. Lawmakers approved a budget for the current fiscal year that's about $1 billion larger than what's currently available. Governor Susana Martinez is expected to call the legislature into a special session this month to address that budget. Now, where should lawmakers cut the budget? Is there a program that you're worried about in this debate? You can get in touch with us here at NewMexicoInFocus.org and tell us what you think. We're also on Facebook and Twitter, of course. Now, our line opinion panelists are ready to go on this one this week. I'm joined by Tom Garrity from the Garrity Group PR, Janice Arnold-Jones, former Republican state representative, Laura Sanchez-Rivey, an attorney at Cuddy & MacArthur, LLP, and Julianne Grimm, editor of the Santa Fe Reporter. Welcome all. Now, Tom, the average New Mexican, what do you think, this is a great question from our production crew, what do you think the average New Mexican needs to consider when it comes to following this budget story? What do we need to know? Is it a panic? Is it, as Larry Larrañaga said a couple of weeks ago, not that big of a deal? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
how should we take this?
I don't know if it, I mean, I don't necessarily agree with the Representative Larrañaga,
Right.
but I will say that the rest of New Mexico can, kind of scratch their heads. So what the heck just happened?
Right.
I mean, how do you blow $100 or $1 billion in that short amount of time,
Right.
and there's no checks and balances? So I think, there are two questions that are taking place in the mind of a typical New Mexican.
Mm-hmm.
One is, how on earth did we get so off track so quickly?
Thank you.
Which, can be attributed to government and mainly oil and gas. But two, what do you do from this point forward? And I think now the question is, after we get over the shock of the hangover and going, oh my gosh, is how do we move that to the conversation of wants and needs? What do we want in government and what do we
Right.
need from government?
Right.
And that's probably what's going to take up a lot of the conversation as we lead into the special session,
Right.
which is long overdue, and then the regular legislative session in 2017.
Laura, the idea that, a little more detail on the special Tom just mentioned, in essence, they're going to be patching the hole from the last budget cycle. We're not even dealing with the July this year cycle going into next year, 2017, which is a whole nother wagon full of money we have to deal with. So it's sort of this catching up, falling behind, catching up, falling behind. How do we get ahead of this curve? That's my question. Because we could be doing this till 2020 if we wanted to, for gosh sake.
Right. Well, I mean, one of the big problems, I think, is that we have such volatility in our tax revenues. And there was an article that talked about that. Basically how we've had in the past, I think there's been at least 3 years in the past 10, where we've had a significant shortage of projected revenues than
right.
what we had expected from the previous year. And so that creates all kinds of volatility. And then we have everything, sort of all the eggs in one basket with oil and gas. So, I mean, long term, we need to figure out how to diversify. And I think a lot of people are saying that, but we're sort of doing it by little baby steps instead of taking, the plunge to really sit down and redo our entire tax system, which I know a lot of people have called for, but we need to figure out how to try to diversify that so that we're not completely beholden to one industry. And so as it rises and falls, we end up, dealing with the shortfalls from that. I think also, with regard to this particular problem we're in immediately, I still think there's going to be a problem trying to get everybody on the same page to actually have a special session. You have, we're basically right after Labor Day. That's the traditional, time for campaigning. That's when the real campaigns kick off. And so even though we see all kinds of things happening before that, really, the rubber hits the road, so to speak, after Labor Day. And that's the worst time to try to get everybody to come together from different sides of the aisle. And so I think we're going to have a hard time getting people to actually agree to anything before they walk into a half-day session or whatever.
Janice, pick up on the tax thing. We've had a lot of politicos here saying this is the problem. We're going to talk about taxes here in a little bit, or revenue enhancements a little bit, but just tax loopholes for the moment. Because, help me understand, there's no way you can sit down in one regular session and fix a tax problem like this, or a tax code.
Sure you can.
Can you? Okay,
Absolutely.
tell me how this works.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it's just like the LFC working on the budget. And I'm calling out Jason Harper, you're the chair of tax, let's get to it. But when Franklin Jones, back in the day when we had no revenue, we couldn't fund our schools. And in one session they did go in, and that is the genesis of the gross receipts tax. But what we have done to it has outlived its usefulness. It is time to sit down because you cannot just go in and piecemeal this. It is time to do the job.
Is it really doable? I mean, folks who have gotten these tax breaks, they're going to fight to keep them.
Of course they are. But
do we have the will to roll these kind of things back?
It's not as awful as it sounds. Yes, you may have a special tax break that is going to change. and you may lose some of that, but you may not pay as much in another area. I think you will find if you revisit and restructure the tax code that it will balance out. If you're only here in New Mexico because you get a very special deal and you have the restaurant here with the special deal and the one down the street doesn't get that, I'm sorry, you don't belong here. And so yes, we can do this, and it is time.
Good job. I like that. It is time. Think about that if you would. It is time. Because again, we've had committees. I think you were on one years ago. We've had lots of people looking at this for a long time. You see what I'm saying? Is that going to be enough to get us where we need to be? Closing tax loopholes?
I think based on the performance of the legislature, and I know there are a lot of hardworking people there that are trying to come up with solutions, but based on what they've been able to accomplish with the current top of the fourth floor with the current governor, I'm not really optimistic that we're going to see some silver bullet. I don't think we're going to see a creative solution. I hope that we do. And I think one thing that's interesting with the volatility of the oil and gas market is kind of responsible for putting us where we are today. There have been efforts to change some of the regulations around natural gas development with respect to flaring. So you've got these big, developers who are allowing like the cheaper gas to burn off. If you drive up to Farmington and you look off on the horizon, you'll see big flares. And there's some studies to suggest that capturing that gas and collecting the royalties on that would have a revenue effect. But yet you see this administration and you see, I think, some people in the legislature who are really not willing to even put that on the table. So again, it's not going to fix this $1 billion problem right away, but I think there are some things that have sort of been sacred cow. They've been off the table that probably need to come back and get talked about.
And under the Julian, the cloud of we've got the governor saying she wants 5% cuts across the board, and we've got that on top of things too. And I guess my question to the whole table is, do we see a light at the end of the tunnel on balancing the budget by doing these things without taxes going up? Is it even possible? Tom, I want to start with you.
Yeah, I think it's possible, or it's plausible. Is it possible is a whole other issue. In order for something like that to happen, there has to be a lot of good open debate and discussion to say, here's what we need and here's what we want. Back to those wants and needs.
Sure.
But right now, with what would appear to be anyway behind the scenes closed door conversations, you just can't figure out what certain parties are saying, here's what we view as important.
Right, exactly right.
Go ahead, I just have to jump in here. We need elected officials that have got some cojones, some ovares. Come on, we are in trouble. We have spent $610 million out of the reserves. We are negative. Right. That's the loss that people don't realize, that you really need to have a reserve. And to ask our legislature to meet in secret, we are not going to solve it like this, but we have a process. It's called the Legislative Finance Committee, and it is time to call them into a special meeting and say, we are going to propose a budget and do the fix. And they meet 3 to 4 days on a regular basis. And I'm not saying you're going to get this done in 3 to 4 days, but to do it in secret, we are going to give up things, and we need to recognize it in order to get the things that we want. Win Quigley was right. You have to put your money where your treasure is.
That's right. In the Journal this week
was
on
a good
Thursday,
article.
it was terrific.
I'm sorry, Laura.
That's okay. That's okay. The pain of cuts. We're back to the pain of cuts versus the pain of revenue enhancement. Which is the easier way to go? Which is more sellable politically? I think we know the answer to that. But you know what I mean? How do we deal with this? Because the 5% cuts are going to hurt. And they cannot be the last ones if we're going to balance the budget just by cutting. So where do we end up if we just cut without revenue enhancement?
I just don't. I don't see how you get it done without looking at both sides of that ledger. You have to have everything on the table and figure out what makes sense in terms of priorities for the state. What makes me nervous is cutting at the most vulnerable. The people who really need it the most, people, Medicaid, any other kind of state aid programs, which are a large part of, the budget as well. Salaries are a big part of the budget. We already have, basically positions being frozen and not refilled, which means that, people are suffering in terms of getting the right customer service from our state agencies. But I do think that both sides have to be on the table, and at some point, there has to be some tough decisions made, which makes it, I think, politically really difficult because it's an election year. So nobody wants to have that, hanging around their neck, that they basically voted right before the election to raise taxes. But how else are they going to get this done?
Well, there is a way to get it done, and that is through economic development. I remember the conversation 6 years ago was, oh my gosh, we're too dependent upon the federal government.
That's right.
And now the conversation is, oh my gosh, we're too dependent on the oil and gas industry. Well, hello, those are the two industries that are most prominent here. What about growing the private sector? And that is just something that
But that's a
just not
long-term
taken.
solution.
It is
That's
a very
not-
long-term
But that's not going to fix the current budget shortfall.
It is, but if the watch if somebody was on the watch to make sure that we were actually trying to be as competitive as we could to maximize that 7% cut, then we would be, or tax incentive, then we would probably not be in this situation. But instead, you have a lot of business that is going elsewhere instead of here in New Mexico.
Interesting.
But there's
Go
one
ahead,
other
please.
little thing too, is if you cut too much in terms of personnel, then the opposite happens. You know, inspections don't get done. People decide to then work under the table. So we're missing all of that revenue. Your tax department, if you're not calling people back to answer their questions, they eventually throw up their hands and say, I don't want to do business here. Come on.
Exactly right. Got a minute left. I want to touch on another thing. Our Economic Development Secretary, John Barela, has decided to leave. He is going to do something in Texas. Julianne, you know, we need to have a little talk about his performance and what he did or did not do. Give me your sense of him as in that department.
It's really interesting that the governor put out a statement, really glowing statement about John Barela's performance and how his vision was going to continue. And I was almost like, did she wake up on a different planet this morning? I got the buzzword diversity, was in her statement. What I thought was really interesting is that, John Barela is going to work at a border business, that's, I think, headquartered in Texas and works on this cross-border issue, which is one thing that this administration has, really fought. They've said immigrants don't have a place, and they're ignoring the economic benefit of supporting the immigrant workforce. They've fought them on driver's licenses. But the other thing that is interesting is that the person who left that company and created a vacancy for John went to work in the alternative energy sector. And I think that that's a good thing to observe as well, that we have not done as much with advancing alternative energy. Right. This administration defunded the oversight for that transmission line in southern New Mexico, and I don't really know what's happening with that, but I think that's another area that we could work harder on.
What grade would you give Mr. Barela?
What grade would I
Yes.
give him?
Yes.
I'm not into that whole matrix number, letter grade thing.
You're an editor. You deal in facts. And,
Let the numbers speak for themselves.
That's right.
That's right.
What's your sense of his performance? What do you think?
So John is one of the nicest guys you're ever going to meet.
Sure.
I sort of resent the numbers on exports. While we did export more, how much of that was produced in New Mexico? And I think the number is down like 2%.
Right.
It is so that was a pass-through. I appreciate the activity, but was that really a win for the state of New Mexico? The other thing that I've noticed about the department is it never was fully staffed. And, economic development is tough enough as it is. And so you can't be too thin. If you are too thin, then you can't do the job. And
That's
so
right.
I give him at best a B.
There you
at
go.
best.
Okay. What do you think, Laura, his performance? What has he done for us, as they say?
So, another example of sort of cutting numbers to make it look good. His website said that he, under his leadership, that unemployment went down 2.5%, when actually it's at 6.4% right now, and makes us the third worst in the country, behind Alaska, who's at 6.7, and Nevada, who's at 6.5, and then Puerto Rico, which sadly is at 11.4. But in terms of states, we're the third worst in the country. So to say, it went down 2.5 percentage points sounds great. When you look at it as compared to other states in our region, especially, we really are not doing as much. He did work on revamping LEDA, the Local Economic Development Act. I think clawbacks was an important area that people wanted to see, make sure that clawbacks were a part of that. So, to his credit, he did work on some of that. But in terms of really getting out there and attracting more business and doing the kind of economic development that I think Tom was talking about long term, I don't see it. And so for me, as a sort of a political hack, I see this time right now in the governor's administration as the time for cabinet members to really look at what's next. You don't want to be the last guy hanging on, on the 11th hour of an administration, because that
Right.
means everybody else hired you. So it's interesting to see all these people leaving right now.
It's a little early for the exodus.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Not if you want to land on your feet.
I got in a
Good
little bit of trouble myself when I actually proposed at this table after the governor's first term that she should let him go and bring in a new economic development secretary to signal to the markets that she is serious about what you talked about a second ago. But that didn't happen. Do you know what I mean? She didn't make that change, and I still stand on that. But your sense of his performance and what he did.
So I think the short answer is if you're in Santa Teresa,
Yes.
then he gets an A+.
Yes.
Absolutely.
For the rest of the state, it needs improvement. Because maybe his team wasn't fully staffed, but you know what? You have the New Mexico Partnership, you have Albuquerque Economic Development, you have Movida, you have all these other organizations that, as a leader, you're supposed to come in and coordinate all these different entities for the good of the state. And it just if it's happening, then I haven't seen it.
I haven't either, so we'll see what happens. Now, when we come back to the line, we'll discuss the most recent controversy around the Santa Fe Fiestas.